My struggling job search was finally coming to an end. Finally, I was able to reach the final interview with one company. I applied to dozens of companies and received rejection letters from several of them. Fortunately, I received an invitation for a third interview for the company that was my top pick. I was told by my seniors that this third and final interview, so to speak, was just a formality. They claimed that if you make it this far, you will receive a job offer. However, I couldn't let my guard down. I took an early subway with a little time to spare. The subway was packed with commuters. I always carry my business bag in my hand when I walk. But when the metro is packed, I pull out my shoulder belt and put it on my shoulder. By keeping my hands above my shoulders, I can avoid any suspicion. I was depressed to think that I have to ride a crowded train every day starting in April when I joined the company. Then, I saw a high school girl standing diagonally in front of me. But something was not right. The metro was full, but not at 200% occupancy. However, a middle-aged man in a business suit standing just behind the high school girl appeared to be unusually near to her. Wait a minute, is he a molester? I decided to watch carefully for a while. I couldn't see the middle-aged man's hand because it was hidden by the woman standing in front of me. The high school girl was looking down and appeared to be tightly gripped a silver rod that stretched from the floor to the ceiling. I recalled it was termed a stanchion pole. I think I read that in some book. It was one of the many things I learned in the hopes that it would help me communicate when I was looking for work. While I was thinking about this, an announcement was made that we would be arriving at the station shortly. As the woman in front of me moved to the door, I saw the decisive moment. A middle-aged man's hand was touching a high school girl's buttocks. It wasn't as if the back of his hand was touching her because of the crowded train. He was clearly wrapping her buttocks with his hand. The dark blue pleated skirt, which should have drawn a straight line, had been deformed by the nasty hand. I stepped out into the space vacated by the woman and grabbed the middle-aged man's hand. "What are you doing?" The middle-aged man freaked out. "Nothing." The middle-aged man muttered weakly, clearly upset. As soon as he looked down, the high school girl looked up and saw my face. There were tears in her eyes. She must have been very scared, and I felt sorry for her. As a man, I couldn't condone such a despicable act. Once again, I felt anger towards the molester. "Was he touching you?" I asked the high school girl, and she nodded. Passengers were buzzing, but there was no defensive voice. I was relieved to know that I had not made a mistake or unfairly accused someone. I wondered if everyone was aware of it. Maybe everyone just turned a blind eye and didn't aid her. Well, maybe I was overthinking. Everyone's eyes were on their smartphones or paperbacks, not paying attention to others. There were several women on the train, but no one was caring for the high school girl. Persons of the same gender should have assisted the girl in this situation rather than a man like me. Everyone seemed to be observing from distance, not wanting to get involved. Even though everyone else was right before me, I felt distant. One guy even pointed his phone at me and tried to recall the scene. I glared at him lightly, and he put down his hand that was pointing the camera at me. At that moment, the subway arrived at the station at just the right moment. "You need to come with me," I told the middle-aged man as I grabbed his hand. He obeyed me without resistance. The high school girl got off the train together with us on the platform. I wondered if I should just go to the station attendant in a situation like this. I had no idea how to deal with this unforeseen incident, something I had never experienced before. For now, I couldn't let go of the molester's hand because I didn't want him to escape. "How can I help you?" 3 businessman-like men, who must have gotten out from the next car, approached me. The passengers in the same car were all whispering about the molester. I assumed they heard it and came to assist me. I felt reassured because I was at a loss for what to do with the molester. The high school girl was still trembling, and I couldn't take care of her by myself. I witnessed the molester, so I asked him to get off the train with me. When I told them, they gazed at each other and appeared to be communicating with their eyes in some way. The next thing I knew, two of them were standing on each side of the molester, restraining his arms. I was stunned and overwhelmed by the brilliant movement. As they made their move, I unknowingly let go of the molester's hands.
Thank you for your cooperation.
The other man showed me his police identification card. There were police officers working undercover.
Could you tell us a little bit about the situation?
I accompanied them to the station attendant's office. Fortunately, the two police officers who had just restrained the molester appeared to have escorted him to another room right away. The girl and I were asked about the situation in the station attendant's room by the police officer who showed us his police identification card. She was too shocked to speak, so I spoke up for her. I wasn't there to see the whole thing, so only she knew the whole story. I quickly finished what I could tell the officer. All that was left was a light Q&A session to prove my identity. But the girl had gone through a terrible situation. Even though she knew I was the man who helped her and the other man was a police officer, she was undoubtedly uncomfortable being surrounded by men. Unfortunately, there seemed to be no female station staff at the station. I knew that as a man, I wouldn't be able to help her. By the time I finished explaining everything, it was almost time for the interview to start. Of course, I could have said, I have something important to do, so can we do this another day? I could have refused and left, but I couldn't leave the high school girl trembling with fear. I was afraid the guy might resist because I am not that powerful. Thank goodness that you were there, officer. Afterward, I tried to keep the conversation cheerful, hoping that small talk would distract her. I was anxious, but I knew she was in much more suffering than I was. I remained at the site until the female police officer who had been summoned as an instant backup arrived. It was fate that I encountered such an event on such an important day. I guess that means I didn't have a chance with that company. I didn't regret what I did, but I still felt disappointed that I had thrown away a great opportunity. I felt it would be impolite not to contact, so following the interview, I immediately contacted the company where I was due to have my final interview. The person on the other end of the line was polite. I'll let you know who's in charge of human resources, so please come to the office. Even though she said so, I knew I wouldn't be getting a job offer. But I headed to the office just in case. When I arrived, the receptionist was somehow very smiling. I was escorted to the interview room on the 5th floor, but all the other candidates had already left. There were 3 chairs lined up in a deserted hallway. The people who had been waiting here about an hour earlier today were supposed to be my colleagues. That could have been the guy who sat next to me during the written exam. He appeared to be quite intelligent, yet he panicked during the exam. Or there could have been a girl who shocked me during the group interview by replying in a systematic manner. So she's the type of person that the company is looking for. I remembered her vividly, since that was the perception of her. Looking back, I had nothing but great views of the corporation since attending the company orientation, which marked the start of my job search. To be honest, I had some bitter memories of job hunting. Some companies clearly had no intention of hiring new graduates, but seemed to be recruiting just to keep up appearances. There were also unmotivated HR personnel who gave only curt answers to any questions I asked. I even experienced pressure interviews. Some people act like jerks, possibly out of competitiveness, despite the fact that we were both students in the same position and looking for work. However, strangely enough, I never met anyone I didn't like through this company. I thought it was a good match. I was extremely moved by the thought of the colleagues with whom I would have worked, and I wished I could have worked here with them.